Is your HOA always this fair? A tow truck, beep, beep, hit my driveway at sunrise as Karen waited by my cracked mailbox. She'd filed fake violations, doubled my fines, then ordered my work truck to be towed right off a county road she didn't control. So I called an attorney, turned every notice into a lawsuit exhibit, and watched the judge's gavel drop paper stamp red tape flashing under harsh courthouse lights. Next week, their cash vault records sat sealed in a gray box, the clubhouse dark anyway. That's where my story starts. The morning Karen tried towing my work truck started with a sound I'll never forget. Beep, beep, beep. At first, I thought it was the garbage truck. Then the metallic backing up alarm came again louder, right outside my bedroom window. Diesel rumble followed, shaking the glass. I yanked on yesterday's jeans, grabbed a clean t-shirt from the chair, shoved my feet into my boots, and cut through the kitchen. My coffee thermos sat empty on the counter. Out the window, I could see the red flag still up on my mailbox, pointing straight at the green County Route 12 sign. Normal morning, until I stepped onto the porch. A flatbed tow truck sat half on the asphalt, half on the gravel shoulder in front of my little house hazard lights blinking. A steel hook hung a few inches from the axle of my old white Chevy work truck cable already tight. My stomach went cold. Frank, my neighbor, was at the edge of my yard in his faded ballcap iPad already up. "Neil, you seeing this?" he called. "I'm seeing it," I said. Cool morning air and the smell of diesel hit me together. The driver eased the truck back another foot, eyes on the hook, not on me. Then I saw her. Karen Walsh stood just off the pavement in a crisp blouse and spotless tennis shoes, clipboard tucked under one arm like a badge. HOA President, Queen of Cedar Ridge. My personal migraine. She gave me a bright, brittle smile. "Morning, Neil." "Karen," I said. "Why is there a tow truck in front of my house?" "Commercial vehicles aren't allowed on the street overnight," she replied, tone as clean as her blouse. "It's in the Cedar Ridge covenants. We've given you multiple reminders." I walked down the porch steps until my boots hit the line where my gravel met the asphalt. "This is a county road," I said. "My work truck is on the county shoulder. Your covenants stop at that brick sign by your gate." Her eyes slid over the ladder rack, the dented bumper, the faded logo on the door. She didn't see 30 years of crawling under houses. She saw a violation. "Cedar Ridge standards apply to adjacent lots as well," she said. "We have a responsibility to maintain appearance. Your equipment doesn't qualify." Behind her, the tow operator shifted his weight. Grease-stained jacket remote in one hand, cable humming softly. "Go ahead and hook his truck," Karen said without looking back. "We'll bill the charges to his account." Frank's voice came from the side. Neil hit record now. He tapped the screen and raised the iPad so that little red light pointed at Karen and my truck. Just seeing it changed something in me. The first rush of fear burned off, leaving something harder. I stepped forward until the gravel crunched under my boots and the hook hovered inches from my axle. The driver cleared his throat. Sir, could you step back? I just need to get this hooked so we can—" "No," I said. He blinked. "No. That truck has my tools in it," I said. "That truck pays my mortgage. And you're standing on a county shoulder about to take it because a neighborhood association doesn't like how it looks. You got a police order with you?" He looked down at his clipboard, then up at Karen. "Ma'am, you said the sheriff signed off," he said. Her smile tightened. "The HOA board authorized removal," she said. "That's all you need. Cedar Ridge has enforcement rights over this stretch." I let out a breath that was half laugh, half warning. "No, you don't." Frank shifted his grip on the iPad. It gave a soft electronic beep. "Say that again for the record," he called. Karen finally turned toward him. "You can't film me without my consent," she snapped. "Pretty sure I can on a public road," Frank said. "But you can ask your attorney." The tow driver blew out a long breath. "Look, I'm not trying to get in the middle of any neighborhood war," he said. "I was told this was a private road governed by the association. It's not," I said. I pointed to the green county road sign bolted to the pole just beyond my leaning mailbox. County Route 12. White letters older than the subdivision. That says different. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Hazard lights blinked. Diesel clattered. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked and went quiet again. The driver looked at the sign, then at me, then back to Karen. The silence stretched. Then he lowered the remote. The winch motor whined down. The hook sagged, swaying a hair's breadth from my axle. Without a police order, he said slowly, "I'm not touching your work truck." Karen's face froze. "You have a contract," she said. "You're required to comply with community enforcement actions." He shook his head. "My contract's with the towing company, ma'am, not with you. And my license is with the state. I'm not risking it over an HOA technicality." The adrenaline in my shoulders sharpened into something clean. I looked straight at Karen. "You hear that?" I said. "He won't move my truck without real authority. That's how this works. Hands off my work truck unless you've got real authority." Frank let out a low whistle. "That's going in the highlight reel," he said. Karen's gaze moved between the three of us, hunting for control and not finding it. "This isn't over, Neil," she said quietly. She turned and walked toward her SUV, clipboard pressed tight against her ribs. The tow truck's engine eased down to idle hazard lights still pulsing on the damp pavement. I stood beside my truck, jaw tight, the early sun just starting to burn off the mist over County Route 12. And I knew she was right about one thing. This wasn't over. The bright yellow slip was the first thing I saw when I stepped outside the next morning. It was plastered under my work truck's wiper blade like a warning tag on condemned property. Bold block letters across the top read, "Violation Commercial Vehicle." A second line underneath "Fine," doubled for non-compliance. I stood there for a second, jaw-locked, morning chill sinking through my t-shirt. Same spot, same county road, same truck. Only difference was the paper screaming for attention. Frank whistled low from the property line. "They woke up mean today." I pulled the notice free. The page crackled cheap HOA paper stiff from cold. A barcode at the bottom. Someone wanted this to look official. Laura's voice hit from behind me. "I told you, document everything." She walked up the gravel in her denim jacket, travel mug in hand, still smelling faintly of diner coffee. Laura had that steady tone people listen to. Former county clerk. Quiet, sharp. She'd seen this kind of nonsense before. "This is escalating," she said, tapping the notice. "You need a trail. Photos, times, copies." "I just want to fix furnaces, Laura," I muttered. "Not fight political wars." She raised an eyebrow. "Karen started the war. You need to win the paperwork." Frank stepped closer. "You want me to grab the iPad?" "Yeah," I said. "Let's get a clean shot." The morning sun glinted off my mailbox flag as he took photos shots of the county sign, the truck, the placement of the notice. The kind of framing you learn only after living next to conflict long enough to expect it. Laura folded the notice, once slid it into a gallon zip bag she'd brought. "New folder," she said. "We're calling it the Karen folder." I huffed a breath. "You were ready for this." "I've been ready since you tried dictating how far your trash bin can lean against your shed," she said. We moved to my tool bench in the garage, old oak counter scarred by years of wrenches and failed coffee cups. Laura spread the bagged notice on the surface. Frank pulled up the pictures he'd just taken. "Keep them," she said. "We'll print them at the post office." "Why the post office?" I asked. "Timestamp on their copier is federal," Laura said, harder for Karen to argue with. She was right. It irritated me that she was right. I wanted this to be over, but wanting wasn't stopping the crack forming in my quiet life. The three of us walked into Miller's Diner around 10. Chrome stools, smell of bacon, retired guys arguing about last night's game. My demographic exactly the kind this whole mess would infuriate. We grabbed a booth near the window. Frank slid napkins across the table. "Write down what happened yesterday," he said. "Just notes. Times." Laura nodded. "Do it while it's fresh." So I did, scratching the sequence onto diner napkins. 7:12 a.m. tow truck. Hook lowered. Karen on scene. 7:19 a.m. county sign photo. Tow operator refused without police order. 7:23 a.m. Karen left. Laura tucked the napkins into the zip bag with the notice. "Evidence is boring until it saves you," she said. "We hit the post office next." The copier hummed bright white sheets sliding out with that stamped footer USPS 10:47 a.m. received. I stacked the copies neatly. This wasn't how I wanted to spend my Tuesday, but it wasn't optional anymore. By 11 that night, I was half asleep in my recliner when Frank banged on my door. "You gotta see this." We stepped outside. Cold wind, quiet street, and one figure standing next to my work truck with a phone out angled down, flash-off pointing directly at my license plate. The HOA volunteer. Same guy who once measured my grass with a ruler. Frank whispered, "I've got him recorded from the porch cam." As the volunteer tiptoed away, Frank held up his phone so I could see the clip time-stamped clearly. 11:02 p.m. The guy creeping around like he was casing a burglary. Laura arrived minutes later, robe over pajamas, hair tied back. She watched the clip twice. Then she said the thing I didn't want to admit out loud. "This is targeted harassment." The words rang heavier than the cold. The crack wasn't just forming, it was widening. Back inside, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. "Sheriff's Office. Mr. Dawson, we received a towing complaint earlier today involving your work truck. Give me a call." My thumb hovered over the screen. "Sheriff complaint, from who?" Frank looked at me. "What now?" So I played the message again, and the unease in my gut dug deeper. The second time I heard the tow truck, I didn't jump. I froze. The engine growled low as it rolled up County Route 12, again headlights cutting through the early haze. Gravel popped under its tires as it eased into the same spot as before, inches from my work truck. Then came the sound I'll never forget. A metallic tap against my rear bumper. Prop number 2, the first crack. Not damaged, but touched. Crossed. I stepped off the porch boots, crunching gravel. My breath came out white in the cold. The tow operator didn't meet my eyes. He just held the remote close to his chest like he wished it were a shield. "She says she has extended jurisdiction," he whispered when I got close enough. He didn't have to say who she was. Karen appeared behind him, arms folded, chin lifted like she'd been waiting to deliver a speech. "Kneel," she said sharply. "You were warned. Your truck violates Cedar Ridge standards, and this time we're enforcing consequences. You don't have jurisdiction here," I said evenly. "This is county property." She gave a tight smile. "We amended our bylaws last night. Adjacent Compliance Authority." A cruiser pulled up before she could finish. Blue and white county markings. I could have hugged it. Sheriff Daniels stepped out, hat under his arm, looking like a man who had already lost patience with his morning. He took one long look at the setup hook on my bumper, Karen blocking the shoulder. The tow operator, pale as chalk, then turned to me. "Mr. Dawson, you called about a second tow attempt." "Didn't get the chance," I said. "They beat me to it." Daniels nodded once, then faced the tow operator. "Step away from the vehicle." The operator obeyed instantly, lowering the remote like it weighed 100 pounds. Karen marched toward the sheriff. "Officer, Cedar Ridge, HOA, has authority to enforce vehicle standards on this roadway. Our board voted." Daniels raised his hand. "Ma'am, stop." His tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Karen's words died mid-sentence. "This," he said, pointing to the asphalt, "is County Route 12. It is maintained by the county. It is regulated by the county, and the HOA has zero authority on this road." Karen blinked like someone had slapped her with paperwork. "That can't be right. Our amended bylaws—" "Your bylaws," Daniels said, "don't override state or county jurisdiction. You can't tow, you can't threaten, you can't enforce anything beyond your gates." Frank, from the property line, muttered, "Somebody tell her again for the camera." He lifted his phone slightly. Karen's jaw tightened when she saw the recording light. Karen tried again. "Sheriff, his truck lowers property values. We have over 70 homeowners." Daniels stepped closer, voice firmer. "Ma'am, I'm going to say this plainly. You touch this man's truck again and I'll be taking statements for harassment, unlawful interference with property, and misuse of enforcement authority." The tow operator backed away another step. "I didn't know, Sheriff. She told me I know what she told you Daniel said, and you're done here. Karen's face shifted anger, disbelief, embarrassment, all fighting for first place. This is a misunderstanding, she said finally. We were simply acting for the community, no, Daniel said. You were acting outside your authority. Silence hit harder than her words ever could. For the first time, Karen looked small. Daniels turned to me. Mr. Dawson, if they attempt to tow your work truck a third time, you call me directly. Then he looked back at Karen. And if anyone from Cedar Ridge touches this truck again, we'll talk charges. He didn't have to raise his voice. The line was drawn bright as the morning sun hitting the hood of my truck. Karen exhaled sharply, almost a hiss, then spun on her heel and walked fast toward her SUV. The tow operator hurried after her, apologizing under his breath. Daniels tipped his hat at me. Get your documentation straight, he said. People like her don't stop after being told no. As he left, Frank wandered over, phone still up. Well, he said, that's going to look great in the folder. I rubbed a hand over my face. My bumper still held the faint tap mark where the hook had touched it. It wasn't real damage, but it was enough to show me this wasn't random. This was deliberate. Escalating. Laura pulled up minutes later, parking behind my truck. She stepped out, eyes scanning the scene like she'd been expecting trouble, and found confirmation. Please, tell me that was the sheriff I just passed. Yep. And he shut her down, I said. Completely. Laura let out a slow breath, the first hopeful one I'd heard all week. Then her expression shifted, sharpening. Neil, she said quietly, it's time for an attorney. The chill in the air deepened. Because she was right. Sheriff or not, Karen wasn't finished. And the next move wouldn't be small. Mark watched the video twice without saying a word. He sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, glasses sliding down his nose. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the HVAC pushing cool air through a vent that rattled every few seconds. On his screen, Karen's voice played clear as day. Go ahead and hook his truck. We'll bill the charges to his account. Mark hit pause and leaned back in his chair, eyes on the frozen frame of the tow hook kissing my bumper. This isn't enforcement, he said quietly. It's power abuse. Laura sat beside me in the two worn chairs facing his desk, fingers laced tight around a legal pad. I felt my jaw clench at the words. Hearing someone else call it what I'd been thinking all along did something to my chest. You're sure? I asked. You're not just humoring the guy who hates HOA letters, Mark snorted. I don't do humor, Neil. Not when there's a camera, a tow truck, and a sheriff on record saying they're out of bounds. He clicked to the next clip. The one from the nighttime volunteer sneaking around my truck taking photos at 11 p.m. The screen glow threw long shadows across the shelves of casebooks behind him. Look at the timestamp, he said. It's not patrolling the neighborhood. It's stalking your livelihood. Laura finally spoke. And the first notice, the yellow one. Mark reached for the folder she'd brought, flipped it open, and slid the plastic sleeve out. He lifted the violation notice carefully, like evidence from a crime scene. No letterhead from the county, he said. Just the HOA logo. They doubled a fine they had no right to issue, then used it to justify towing. He glanced at me. You kept the envelope. This came in the folder, Laura said. Postmark and all. Perfect. He dropped it back into the sleeve. Now we know they used the Postal Service to push a fraudulent debt. That's one more brick for the wall. The air vent rattled again. Somewhere down the hall, a printer spat out pages. It felt like the whole building was made of paper and humming machines. So what now, I asked. Do we just keep filming and hope she gets bored? Mark opened a lower drawer and pulled out a thin, neatly clipped stack of pages. He laid it in the center of his blotter, turned it so the header faced us. Motion to compel financial records. The title read. I stared at it. You already had that ready. Laura gave him a look. You suspected this before we walked in, didn't you? I suspected something, Mark said. Nobody pushes this hard over one truck unless there's money involved. Harassment is the surface. The root is usually in the ledger. He flipped the top page, scanning lines with a finger. Cedar Ridge, HOA, is required to produce a full accounting of vendor payments for the last 3 fiscal years, he said, plus board minutes, plus any contracts related to towing security or compliance services. He turned to his computer, clicked through a few files, then dragged one onto the screen. It was a spreadsheet dense with numbers and line items. This is from the limited budget summary they were forced to file with the county last year, he said. Your friend Laura here sent it to me last night. Laura shrugged. Public records request took them by surprise. Mark zoomed in on a particular section. Several entries were highlighted. Here he said, Annual payments to Walsh Family Services, LLC. I frowned. Walsh, as in, he nodded. Same last name. I still need to confirm, but I'd bet my retainer that's tied to Karen. The numbers beside the name were not small. They ran across the page like a slow leak. What are they supposed to be for? I asked. In their notes, Mark said, Community Enhancement and Compliance Consulting. Laura let out a short, humorless laugh. She tried to tow his truck and call it enhancement. Mark looked back at me. His eyes were sharp now, the way they got when he smelled a case with legs. Here's what this means, he said. We're not just going after the harassment. We're going after the cash vault. If a judge signs this motion, they have to open the books. If those payments are kickbacks, she's in real trouble. I stared at the header again. Motion to compel. The words felt heavy and solid like a tool you only pulled out when you were serious about the job. Will this stop her from coming after my truck? I asked. It will stop her from thinking you're a soft target, Mark said. People like Karen push until something pushes back harder and legally. He slid the pages into a large manila envelope, then reached to the side of his desk for a round metal seal. He pressed it into a red adhesive circle, already stuck to the flap, leaned his weight into it with both hands. When he lifted it away, the raised impression of his firm's name caught the light. Laura watched him. That's it, she asked softly. We're really doing this. We're doing this, he said. Once this is filed, they can't pretend this is a friendly neighborhood disagreement anymore. It becomes what it is, a legal dispute over misuse of authority and funds. I swallowed. The hum of the HVAC filled the pause. What do you need from me? I asked. Mark stood holding the envelope. I need you to keep doing exactly what you're doing, he said. Show up, work, keep your truck where you're allowed to keep it, and every time they step out of line, you give me another brick. He handed me a pen and slid a single-page verification form in front of me. Sign here, acknowledging you're requesting this motion and that the facts you've provided are true to the best of your knowledge. I signed. My name looked smaller than I wanted it to, but it was there, on the record. Mark took back the form, slipped it behind the motion, and sealed the envelope fully. The stamp caught the fluorescent light overhead. I'll walk this down to the clerk myself, he said. We'll know it's filed today. Laura stood. How long until we hear something? That depends on the docket, he said. But, given there's already a sheriff report attached, my guess is... His office phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then picked it up, listening for a moment. A slow smile crept into the corner of his mouth. Perfect timing, he said. Thank you. Yes, we'll be there. He hung up and looked at us. That was the clerk, he said. They've slotted us in. My heart picked up. For what? Hearing, set for Monday. Monday morning, the courthouse smelled like burned coffee and floor wax. I sat on a hard wooden bench outside Department C suit jacket heavier on my shoulders than any work coat I owned. Laura was next to me with a manila folder on her lap, thumb running along the edge like a worry stone. Across from us, a bulletin board was crowded with flyers for blood drives, tax workshops, and a faded missing cat notice. Mark came down the hall with his briefcase in one hand and a styrofoam cup in the other. You look like you'd rather be under a house replacing ductwork, he said. I would be, I answered. Crawl space mud washes off faster than this kind of nonsense. Laura managed a thin smile. Please tell me you slept, she said. Eventually, I said. Right after replaying that tow hook in my head about 50 times. Mark checked his watch. Judge Harmon runs on time. When they call our case, keep your answers short and honest. Let me carry the legal weight. The door to Department C opened, spitting out a couple arguing under their breath and a clerk with a stack of files. The clerk called a new case and Mark nodded toward the doorway. "That's us," he said. "Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association versus Dawson on motion to compel." Inside the courtroom was smaller than I expected. Brown paneling, a few pew-style benches, a rail separating public seating from the tables. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making everything feel like it was under a microscope. Karen was already at the other table with a man in a gray suit I didn't recognize. Her hair was perfect posture, straight face locked into something between concern and irritation. 2 board members sat behind her flipping through papers. We took our seats. Mark set his briefcase down, pulled out the motion we'd signed in his office, and laid it neatly on the table. A seal, stamped in red, still caught the light. "All rise," the bailiff said. We stood as Judge Harmon entered. She was in her late 50s, expression calm and unreadable. She sat and the room settled back down. "Call the matter," she said. The clerk read it off, and just like that my life and my truck and my quiet county road became lines in a case caption. Mark rose. "Good morning, Your Honor. Mark Bennett for the movant, Neil Dawson." Karen's attorney followed. "Good morning, Your Honor. Samuel Pike for Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association." Judge Harmon looked down at the motion, then up at Mark. "Mr. Bennett, this is your motion to compel HOA financial records and related documentation. You may proceed." Mark stepped forward just enough to be heard clearly. "Your Honor, my client lives on County Route 12, adjacent to, but not within, Cedar Ridge. Over the past months, the HOA, led by its president, Ms. Walsh, has attempted to tow his commercial vehicle from a county-maintained roadway, issued fines without jurisdiction, and dispatched volunteers to surveil his work truck late at night." He picked up a thin stack. "We have video of a tow hook touching his bumper, a sheriff's report clarifying that the HOA has zero authority on that road, and a pattern of escalating conduct that has nothing to do with safety and everything to do with leverage." Pike cut in. "Your Honor, this is exaggerated. The association is simply trying to uphold community standards. Mr. Dawson's vehicle is unsightly, and Mr. Pike Harmon said, 'I'll hear from you, but not over opposing counsel. Sit tight.'" Pike closed his mouth and sat. Mark continued. "In reviewing the limited budget they filed with the county, we discovered substantial payments to an entity called Walsh Family Services, LLC, under Community Enhancement and Compliance Consulting. We are seeking a narrow order compelling the production of vendor ledgers bank statements for the operating account contracts with that LLC and any documentation related to towing or compliance vendors. If nothing improper has occurred, these records will show that." Judge Harmon turned to Pike. "Mr. Pike, why shouldn't I grant this?" He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this is an overreach. HOA finances are internal matters. Exposing our vendor relationships would be intrusive. There is no evidence of wrongdoing, just a homeowner unhappy about enforcement." Harmon looked at him steadily. "You have a private association that allegedly attempted to tow a man's work vehicle off a county road where it had every right to be after issuing fines it had no jurisdiction to issue. There is a sheriff's report in my packet and video exhibits to match. That, Mr. Pike, is evidence enough to justify a closer look." Karen shifted in her chair. I could see her hands tightening on the edge of the table. "Your Honor," she said quickly, "we were acting for the good of the neighborhood. Our residents expect us to—" "Ms. Walsh, Harmon said you have counsel. Let him speak for you." The room went quiet again. I could hear the HVAC kick on a low whoosh filling the silence. The judge tapped her pen against the motion. "Here is what we're going to do. The motion to compel is granted. Cedar Ridge HOA will produce within 10 business days the full set of financial records listed in the motion, including any and all payments to Walsh Family Services, LLC." Pike started to protest. "Your Honor, the time frame is generous," she cut in. "Given there is already a law enforcement record of questionable conduct, I'm inclined to move quickly. Bailiff, you will take custody of the preliminary financial packet they brought today for in-camera review." The board member behind Karen stiffened. We only brought our most recent statement," he said. "That will do for now," Harmon replied. "You may hand it over." The man opened a small gray lockbox on the table, pulled out a thick envelope, and passed it to the bailiff. The sound of the metal latch snapping open echoed in the room. The bailiff walked it up to the bench where the judge placed it beside her monitor. "From this point forward," she said, "these records are under the custody of this court. Any attempt to alter or destroy related documents will be treated very seriously." Mark didn't smile, but his shoulders eased a fraction. He sat back down. On our side of the rail, my lungs finally remembered how to work. When the hearing wrapped and we stepped out into the hallway, Laura let out a long breath. "She looked like someone just changed the locks on her kingdom," she said. Mark held the door for us. "They're not the only ones who can control a vault," he said. "Now their cash records are effectively seized. Next stop is what's inside them." "Is this really happening?" I asked. "Oh, it's happening," Mark said. "And Monday was just the opening salvo." The Cedar Ridge clubhouse smelled like reheated BBQ and old carpet cleaner. Rows of metal chairs creaked as people shifted jackets, brushing whispers running like static through the room. Fluorescent tubes overhead flickered just enough to make everything feel slightly off. At the front, a portable projector hummed, throwing a blue-tinted slide onto the pull-down screen. White letters glowed against a dark background: Enforcement Fund. $42,000. You could feel the temperature in the room change. Karen stood at the podium and a tailored blazer smile stretched thin. "As you can see," she said into the mic, "our enforcement fund allows us to maintain the high standards that protect your property values." A low murmur rolled through the crowd. People leaned toward each other, whispering. Some just stared at the number like it was a bad lab result. Frank leaned close to my shoulder. $42,000 to send letters and tow trucks," he muttered. "You kidding me?" beside me. Laura's gaze didn't leave the screen. Mark sat on my other side, face unreadable legal pad balanced on his knee. At the back of the room, someone coughed. Someone else said, "That can't be right, just loud enough to carry." The restlessness had been brewing since before the meeting started, tight jaws, crossed arms. Neighbors who usually talked about weather now talking about fines. Karen clicked to the next slide voice a little sharper. "We've had to increase enforcement actions due to repeated non-compliance. That includes unauthorized vehicles and unapproved exterior modifications." A woman in the third row stood up without being recognized. Maria. Dark hair, pulled back glasses low on her nose, papers clutched in her hand. "Explain this," then she said. Karen's smile thinned further. "Ma'am, you'll need to wait until the question period." "This is the question period for me," Maria said, "because my name is on those ledgers you tried to hide." She walked down the aisle toward the front as people twisted in their seats to watch. Her heels clicked over the cheap laminate louder than the mic. When she reached the center aisle, she held up a stapled packet. "These are vendor payments," she said. "Got them from the county file and through my own records request. You want to tell everyone who Walsh Family Services, LLC, is—" The room got very quiet. Karen's attorney Pike shifted in his chair at the side wall. "Ms. Torres' financial details are confidential. They stopped being confidential when you used them to come after my family," Maria shot back. "My son drew chalk rockets on the sidewalk. You labeled it graffiti and fined us $200. A man in the back snorted. Someone else said, "For chalk," Maria flipped to the second page. Meanwhile, over 3 years, more than $30,000 went to Walsh Family Services, LLC for compliance consulting. Same last name as our president here. Nepotism isn't a covenant. Is it? All eyes swung back to Karen. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the podium. "That's a gross mischaracterization," she said. "Those payments were for professional services that benefited the community. Like tow trucks on county roads," someone called out. Laughter broke out rough and angry. Robert, a retiree who kept his lawn neater than a golf course, stood up slowly in the second row. He held a glossy photograph in his hand, a picture of his front door. The finish was a little faded, nothing more. "I got this in the mail," he said. "Said my door was unsightly, and if I didn't strip and refinish it in 10 days, the HOA would place a lien on my house." He turned in a slow half-circle, holding the photo up so the nearby rows could see. "I'm 72, he said. "I've lived here longer than this HOA existed. I did 4 tours overseas so people like her could stand at a podium and talk about curb appeal." His voice didn't shake. That almost made it worse. "You know what the quote was to refinish that door?" he asked. $900 for a door that works just fine. Meanwhile, you've got $42,000 in an enforcement fund to bully people with." Murmurs turned into open voices. "This is ridiculous, out of control. Where's all that money actually going?" Karen tapped the mic, trying to regain control. "Everyone, please, let's maintain order. These are isolated incidents being exaggerated by people who refuse to follow the rules." That was enough. I stood. "Is trying to tow a man's work truck twice off a county road part of your rules?" "Karen," I asked. Heads turned. People recognized me now, the guy with the white Chevy on Route 12, the story that had been circulating in fragments. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Dawson, you are not a member of this association. You have no standing to speak at this meeting." "My truck had plenty of standing when your tow company's hook tapped my bumper," I said. "Twice. Both times you told them you had extended jurisdiction on a road the sheriff himself says you don't control." A man near the aisle leaned toward his wife. Twice he whispered. She said it was just a misunderstanding. I met Karen's stare. "You sent volunteers to photograph my license plate in the dark. You slapped fake fines on my windshield. And when that didn't scare me, you called the sheriff claiming I was the problem." The room started to buzz louder than before. Frank lifted his phone camera pointed straight at the front. Mark rose slowly beside me. The shift in attention was almost physical. The room seemed to tilt toward him. He buttoned his jacket and stepped into the aisle. "For the record," he said, "my name is Mark Bennett. I represent Mr. Dawson." Karen's attorney straightened. "Your Honor," he started, then realized there was no judge here, only numbers and neighbors, and a mic that couldn't save them. Mark didn't raise his voice, but it carried cleanly to the back row. "There is already a sheriff's report on file confirming Cedar Ridge HOA has zero authority over County Route 12, he said, "and there is already a court order granting our motion to compel your financial records." He glanced at the projector slide still frozen on that $42,000 line. Per Judge Harmon's order, he continued, "I will be conducting a full legal seizure of the HOA vault records Monday morning. Bank statements, ledgers, vendor contracts, all of it will be under court custody." The word hung there, seizure like a bell that had just been struck. Several people gasped. Someone in the middle row let out a low, "About time." Another voice, older and rough, said, "Finally." Someone fought back. Maria turned toward the crowd. "You hear that? This isn't rumor anymore. There's a judge and a lawyer and a sheriff involved. This isn't about your petunias, it's about your money." Robert nodded, lifting his photo one more time. "And your homes." Noise swelled. Chairs scraped. Hands went up not to be recognized, but to point. "What else are you hiding? Did you find me so you could pay yourself? We want an audit." The first shout was a single voice. The second had 3 or 4 behind it. Then it became a rhythm, a chant slamming into the walls and rattling the light fixtures. "Audit, audit, audit." Karen's face went pale, then blotchy red. She grabbed the gavel, banging it against the podium so hard the cheap wood jumped. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped. "Everyone clear the room immediately." But nobody moved. The chant rolled on around her like she wasn't there. Her board members looked anywhere but at her, down at their papers, up at the buzzing lights over at the exit. For a second I thought she might try to shout them down. Instead, she stepped back from the microphone, eyes glossy, and turned toward the side door. Pike hurried after her, whispering urgently. She didn't look back. The last thing I saw was the gavel slipping from her hand and hitting the floor with a flat, hollow sound as the crowd kept chanting for an audit. The county hearing room felt colder than the rest of the building, like the wood-paneled walls held onto every argument that had ever bounced between them. Rows of chairs creaked as people settled in, neighbors, a few board members, curious onlookers. At the front, the commissioner adjusted his glasses and spoke into the microphone. "Case number 24-113, he said. Neil Garrett versus Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. My name echoed through the room, steadier than my pulse. Mark leaned slightly toward me. "Breathe," he said. "We've already done the heavy lifting." The clerk approached the table, carrying a sealed gray evidence box with both hands. She set it down gently like it contained something breakable. Across the top, a label read, HOA Cash Vault. Records seized under court authority. Custody. Attorney Davies. Karen stared at the box like it was a live wire. Her attorney Pike whispered something urgent to her, but she didn't respond. Her eyes never left the seal. The commissioner folded his hands. "Mr. Bennett, you may proceed." Mark stood and clicked the small remote in his hand. The projector behind us hummed to life, illuminating the first video frame, my driveway at dawn, tow truck lights glowing in the mist. When the video began playing, the room quieted completely. The tow hook dropped. Karen's voice rang out clearly. "Go ahead and hook his truck. We'll bill the charges to his account." Gasps rippled through the back rows. Someone murmured, "That's not enforcement." Another said, "That's a shakedown." Mark let the full clip play before starting the second the nighttime volunteer creeping around my truck at 11 p.m. Phone pointed at my plates. The commissioner's eyebrows lifted sharply. Then came Sheriff Daniels' testimony, clean and unimpressed. "The HOA has zero authority over County Route 12, Daniels said on the recording. Any attempt to tow Mr. Garrett's vehicle is unlawful." Karen stiffened at the word unlawful, her nails biting into her binder. When the videos ended, Mark placed his hand on the sealed box. "Your Honor, he said these records were seized under your order. With the court's permission, we'd like to open the vault." The commissioner nodded. "Granted." The clerk broke the seal with a soft rip. The sound was small, but in that room it felt like a hammer. She lifted the lid, revealing ledgers, binders, envelopes stuffed with printouts and receipts. Mark pulled the largest ledger free, flipped to a tab marked with yellow tape, and turned the book toward the commissioner. "These," he said, tapping a column, "are vendor payments to Walsh Family Services, LLC." The commissioner leaned forward. "Walsh?" As in the HOA president, Mark nodded. "Yes. Over 3 fiscal years, these payments total more than $30,000. The descriptions are vague: compliance consulting, community enhancement, administrative oversight." Meanwhile, homeowners were fined excessively and inappropriately often for violations outside HOA jurisdiction. I could hear people in the back shifting, whispering, bristling like a crowd, realizing they'd been taken for fools. Mark continued. "By the time that box hit the table, my attorney had already seized their HOA cash vault records and locked them under legal custody." Karen stood abruptly. "This is a distortion," she snapped. "Those payments were approved by the board." The commissioner raised a hand. "You may sit down, Ms. Walsh." Her mouth opened, then closed. Slowly, she lowered herself back into the chair, anger burning hot behind her eyes. Mark placed the ledger back in the box. "Your Honor, the evidence shows harassment, misuse of authority, and irregular financial disbursements. We request dismissal of all HOA claims against Mr. Garrett, reimbursement of his costs, and an independent audit of the enforcement fund." Silence fell. The commissioner sat quietly for several seconds, flipping through one of the binders, his expression tightening with each page. Finally, he looked up. "Here is my ruling." The room seemed to shrink around his voice. "First, the HOA's case is dismissed with prejudice. They had no jurisdiction on a county-maintained road. Attempts to tow Mr. Garrett's vehicle were improper and unsupported by law." Karen breathed out sharply through her nose. "Second," the commissioner continued, "the HOA is fined for misuse of enforcement authority and will reimburse Mr. Garrett for all associated legal fees and costs." Whispers burst through the rows. Relief, indignation, satisfaction. "Third, the enforcement fund is frozen pending a full forensic audit under county supervision." Someone in the back muttered, "Knew it," And lastly, he said, turning toward Karen, Miss Walsh is removed from her position as HOA president effective immediately. Board elections will be ordered within 30 days. Karen's face cracked, not physically, but something in her expression broke in a way I hadn't seen before. She looked at Pike at the floor at the box at me. Nowhere to land. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel struck sharp as a nail gun. As we stepped out into the parking lot, sunlight hit the hood of my work truck, throwing a warm glint across the metal. The same truck she tried to take twice. The same truck that stood its ground like I had. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders dropped. Not from exhaustion, from justice. A year later, my blue work truck gleamed like new metal at sundown. The last rays caught the fresh coat of paint and ran across the fender in a warm stripe, the kind of glow you only get on a quiet road after a long summer day. Grill smoke drifted from my backyard, soft and sweet, mixing with the smell of cut grass and the faint clang of the wind chime Laura bought me last Christmas. Frank sat on a folding chair near the edge of the driveway nursing a soda and watching the sky turn gold. You know, he said, every time I see that truck now I hear that tow hook tapping like a drumbeat. And then I hear the sheriff telling Karen she had zero authority. That video still gets comments. I laughed. You're the one who posted it. Hey, the people wanted the truth, he said. 4 million views says they appreciated it. Laura stepped out from the porch carrying a plate of ribs. 4.6, she corrected him. Last I checked, half the county shared it. You ought to charge royalties. Yeah, sure, I said. I'll put a tip jar on the bumper. She set the plate on the patio table and looked over at my truck. Not the battered version from last year. Not the one with a tow hook mark or dust from county traffic. This one was restored clean, steady mine. Prop number 3 whole again. You kept it looking good, she said. Figured it deserved it, I replied. After everything. She smiled a little. So did you. Out by the mailbox, I saw the newest HOA newsletter clipped under the flag. The title ran in neat, bold letters, Audit, Completed Full Transparency, Confirmed. Beneath it were smaller lines about election reforms, capped fines, and community oversight committees. I hadn't expected to feel anything reading it, but I did. A clean kind of relief, like finally setting down a toolbox you'd been carrying too long. Frank pointed toward the road. Refund checks came in yesterday, he said. Mine was in the mailbox. Karen must have loved signing those. Board treasurer signed them now, Laura corrected. Karen doesn't sign anything anymore. Right, Frank said. Guess old habits die hard. A distant engine rumbled up County Route 12. I knew the sound before I saw the car. Karen's SUV rolled past the bend slower than usual. She sat straighter than I'd seen in months, hands at 10 and 2 eyes fixed ahead. No glares, no confrontations. Just a quiet, passing car, on a quiet evening. She didn't wave, neither did we. But she didn't linger, didn't circle back, didn't stare down my driveway. She just kept driving toward the lake where the water reflected the last of the daylight in long, bright streaks. Laura watched her disappear behind the trees. Funny how quiet things get, she said. Quiet's underrated, I said. She nudged my arm. And earned. I walked over to the truck and laid a hand on the restored fender. Smooth. Cool from the evening air, not a single dent or scrape. Just a good truck doing its job on a road that finally felt like mine again. Frank stood and stretched. Told you it'd make a hell of a story, he said. Didn't feel like a story when we were in it, I answered. Felt like holding my breath for months. Laura came to stand beside me, her shoulder touching mine. Finally, someone fought back, she said softly, and did it right. The wind pushed through the trees, rustling the branches overhead. The chimes tapped once, then twice, like punctuation marks on a sentence we'd been writing for a year. I looked down the long stretch of County Route 12, the same place Karen once tried to take my truck. The same place the sheriff drew his line, the same place we stood now with the smoke of the grill curling upward into the fading light. This road stays quiet, I said, because the truth rode with us. The sun settled low on County Route 12, catching the fresh paint on my restored truck as the wind carried the smell of BBQ across the quiet road. The newsletter posted under my mailbox flag still read, "Audit completed full transparency." Confirmed its stamped seal, catching the last light like a small reminder of how far we came. I learned that when a community finally sees the truth laid out in daylight, even old wounds start to close and the road feels steady again. Laura said, "Finally, someone fought back and it felt less like a victory line and more like a direction we earned together." Share your HOA story. Below your map might help someone redraw theirs.